I feel like this slide was hiding from me. I just was like getting ready to start here. I'm like, oh, I remember this slide, which is kind of cool. It talks about the heat transfer. So the heat comes through the valve, goes through the seat. What kind of seat is that? Allison, right. Look at David drew it correct with the spacing right there. And this is an intake or exhaust? Exhaust. Why is it exhaust? Because it has a sodium chamber. Has the rainforest technology going on in there. Yeah. But the problem we have over here is that the valve is hitting way too much of the seat. Remember we talked about that? And so I really only wanted to touch part of it, like this area right in there. So what would I do to correct it so it only touched right here?
Stone it?
Yeah. Well, how many degrees is this? 45. So I got to top it with a 30. So get rid of that lip right there at the 30-degree stone. And then I got to
Stone it again.
yeah, take off the bottom. Well, this drawing isn't very accurate, but I have to take off some of the bottom then too. Actually be like that. So, all right. Let's see. Yeah, and it just shows how the heat goes through the seat, transfers to the guide, from the guide out to the aluminum, from the aluminum head out to the aluminum fins. But we're not talking about that. Here we go. We were talking about hydraulic tappet units, which you do not have. So, what is this part called right here? Tappet body be more appropriate because it's the body that we have inside. We have the hydraulic unit, which you can see right over here, what I'm holding, except it doesn't have the cap on it. I've got the cap. These two pieces right here in the picture are a match set. Okay, so you have the cup, you have the piston. The piston has a little spring on it. And all of that goes inside the tappet body, and it works like this. All right, so we've got the tappet body out here, and inside you can see the hydraulic unit, and you can see a little stem right here. Here's a little stem. See the stem that goes in. And so what happens is right here is the oil gallery, and we have high pressure oil comes up through here. So we have high pressure from the oil pump, so figure 40 to 60 psi at all times. And there's a hole inside of the tappet right here. And see this black line that goes around there? That's got a name. It's called an annulus. Not an anus, it's a different thing. It's an annulus. So, and the reason why it's like that is because if you didn't have an annulus going around, then you would literally have to have the oil hole lined up with that oil hole, or it wouldn't work. Well, now as it rotates, the oil hole lines up with the annulus, and it fills that up, and it rolls around to the hole and then goes on the inside, where this is waiting inside there. So then it fills up the back of this chamber. So the back of the chamber, back here, comes through here, it fills all this up full of oil. So we have high pressure oil right there, which is allowed to go inside of here. Now, it's actually a simple little thing. So what happens is when it's in this particular configuration here where it's off its lobe, oil is allowed to go through here, bypass that, fill this up, and push this out. And it will. So it'll push that out to a point. It's only got so much throw on it. But it pushes it out until it pushes right here. And that push rod will then push forward on the push rod to the rocker arm and push the rocker arm forward till the rocker arm pushes against the valve, and there it will sit. There's not enough pressure in there against this piston to actually force the valve open. So it just comes all the way up and it pushes on that valve. So if you were to come along and try and push it back the other way, you'd have a hard time because it's hydraulic locked in there. So what happens is then as the cam comes around, we'll make it go this way, comes around and pushes on the tappet body. The tappet body moves forward, pushing more pressure in here, causing the ball to close. This is full of oil. And as it hits the ramp, the initial impact is taken up by this little spring. Okay, so all the oil is locked in there. comes forward, spring hits everything, takes the initial shock, and then this all pushes forward and opens the valve. Now, as it's pushing that valve open, there's a designed leakage between the piston and the cylinder that leaks out. Here, comes out, and that leakage that comes out, this, I don't like this drawing very much, but it comes out through here and down the middle of the push rod. Goes down the middle of the push rod until it gets to the rocker arm, and when it gets to the rocker arm, which I didn't bring any rocker arms in, then there's another annulus there inside of the rocker arm. And so that fills up full of oil and then squirts out of here and pressure lubricates the rocker shaft. And some of the rocker arms, I don't know if I have a picture. No, I do not. Have intakes and exhausts can be different. Sometimes the intake will take a little drip in it like yours has. Some of them actually continue off the annulus and are drilled and actually are leaking out where the foot is on the rocker arm. So that is how they work. So the thing about them is they're called a zero lash lifter. Most people just call them hydraulic lifters, but it's considered a zero lash lifter. So when you're building this kind of engine up, it's very different than what you're going to do. So when you build up your engine, you are going to set the dry tappet clearance. And the dry tappet clearance for your engine is, if I remember, it's like 10 thousandths. I did bring it in. Let me see. No, I didn't bring it in. Let me finish this up. So we have the push clearances. Now we'll stick with this for a few minutes. Okay, I showed you how it works. Let me abbreviate everything I just said. Hydraulic units. Whoa, what can we say about them? We'll say the hydraulic unit is a matched set. Doesn't matter what cylinder these go back in, just that these two pieces never get moved around. They stay together. So it's a matched set. Oil pressure expands, I'll say the unit, to take up all valve clearance, valve to rocker arm clearance. That works. Leak down of unit sends oil down push rod, not the housing, but the actual push rod. Down push rod to rocker arm. Okay, so dealing with these things, it's real easy, but you got to pay in the butt. That's not a pain in the butt. I'd much rather do these than solid lifters any day of the week. Any day of the week. There's tricks to them. And if you know the tricks, they're real easy to deal with. These are very similar. It just has this inside there. You don't take them apart. You've never taken these apart. The stuff inside is not replaceable. This, you can buy a hydraulic unit. You can buy sockets. You can buy tappets. This, you buy this. Everything's inside. Don't take it apart. You can take it apart if you want to, but so they fill up full of oil. And let's just say and this is where it's going to happen. You take apart a cylinder, take a cylinder off an engine, and you're dealing with something like this or that right there. Take the cylinder off and do some repair work to the cylinder. You put the cylinder back on, and then you go to put the the push rods in and set your dry tap. You have to set your dry tappet clearance. That's what I'm doing at. So with hydraulic units, you have to set the dry tappet clearance. Put that must set dry tappet clearance. Must set the dry tappet clearance. Now what's sad is I know far too many mechanics who are very, very careful, and they take the cylinder apart, like this is the intake rocker arm, this is the exhaust, and they put the wire and they label it, and this is the intake push rod, and that's the other push rod, and it's all perfectly labeled, and because they're very careful, they take the cylinder off, then they put the cylinder back on, they put everything back where it goes, and never once bothered to look down in here and deal with these things. So, I mean, I guess the good news is they get everything in the right same spot. In theory, you're fine, but why risk it? So you have to check the dry tappet clearance. So the way you do that is you have to put these in a configuration where they're deflated. All right. So some rules: never. This is Lycoming. Never use a magnet on hydraulic units. Well, easier said than done for some of you, not you, but because that goes in there and that goes in there, and it's been in there for a long time, and it's all full of oil, and it's dry here and easy, so I can just go like that and get it out. But of course, this is inside of an engine, so I can't very well do this with it. So it's in there, and you're like, well, how are you going to get that out? Magnet. Just use a magnet. You can't. You'll be able to get it out. Piece of 040 safety wire with a very tiny 90-degree bend on the end. So is your best tool. Just, piece of 040 safety wire with a bend. Right, very small bend. Stick it in there. You'll be able to pull this out. And you take the same thing, put it in there, twist it, grab it, pull it out. Once you got it out, I use a brass rod or something that's non-magnetic that will fit down in that little tiny hole. And you push, turn, and they push it in, twist it to the unlock. Dang, this one really is tight. Push it to the unlock, push it to the unlock, push it to the unlock. I did it yesterday. Ain't gonna happen. There it goes. And the spring goes in a little annulus in there, little ridge, and it locks it in there. So you push, twist, snap, undo it. Okay, so then you'll find that that's full of oil. So what I do is I take WD-40 or like LPS1, which is your super lightweight stuff, and I'll spray it in there. And then I use my little non-magnetic thing to push the little ball down there with a little spring. And I'll push this together. And you know what works good is the plastic straws from WD-40 actually. Just take that off and push it in there. It pushes the plunger. When you push this, it squirts out the oil. And you put a little more WD-40 in there. Do it again. And it squirts out until you get just WD-40. Then it's a super lightweight WD-40. It's the only thing in there, and you kind of empty it out. Okay, that's now when you put it back together and twist it, then it's, you can, this one actually is really good. It holds air. Then you're able to depress it without any problem. Okay, so I can depress it. I can depress it all the way down. Then you reassemble the whole thing. And when you reassemble your cylinder, and you put the push rod in, the push rod housing, and the rocker arm, you take the rocker arm, you push down on it, which pushes on all this, and you see how much clearance you have between the rocker arm and the valve stem. That is your dry tappet clearance. And it can be a lot. I want to say Continental is like 0.028 to, don't write this down because I'm going by my memory. It's like 0.110. It's like this huge gap. Well, if can't be less than 0.28, it can't be more than 110, and as long as it's within this gigantic range, then the little hydraulic tappet will take up all that space. Jesus. Right? So, yeah. And I forget what Lycoming is offhand.
So is that why you would rather deal with them because of the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what if I did all this and let me see the Lycoming book out. I almost brought it in. Why would I need it today? let's see. Where would I find dry tappet clearance? Anybody know?
Table limit.
Table of limits. How long will it take me to find it? Anybody know?
Timer's on.
Timer's on. Okay, we'll just edit this part out. Do I just read through it or do I look for the picture? Look for the picture.
Section 6.
Let's see. It's not going to show me. It should be 618. 618, 618, 618. Dry tappet clearance, 0.028 to 80. Oh, 0.028 to 080. That is dry tappet clearance, 0.028 to 0.028 to 0.080. So there we go. That is a fact for Lycoming. So I put this all together, and I have my 0.028 feeler gauge, and I have a drill bit that's been calibrated and checked with a micrometer at 0.080, because that's the easiest way to do it. And I measure it out, and I get 0.020 is my clearance between the rocker arm and the tip. I push down here as hard as I can, top dead center compression, so there's no load. Push down, I get 0.020. What the heck do I do about that?
Get a longer rocker arm.
Get a longer rocker arm.
Push rod.
Well, grind it.
Grind it. Yep. Take this out. Grind this off. Come on, guys.
Yeah, you're gonna do with the push rod.
You take the whole engine apart and take this out.
A longer push rod. Yeah.
Shorter push.
Now, if I get a longer push rod,
Oh, sorry, shorter push rod.
oh, I get a shorter push rod.
I think it's longer.
Because you're not getting the minimum clearance.
Less longer.
Let's see.
Less longer.
We've got a valve stem. Got a rocker arm. Little socket. Now we got a push rod. Go into a hydraulic unit with the tappet and the cam lobe. Oops, we'll do cam lobe off cam. There. So if I get a longer push rod, it will push up on this, which will make this part go
Down.
Down.
down, making the clearance more or less.
Left.
Less.
Less. So longer is not the answer. I need
Shorter.
shorter. So shorter. Shorter. So we need a shorter one. And then, but if we had like 0.10, we would need one that is
Longer.
longer. Follow?
Follow.
That's all you do. Swap out push rods till you get what you need right there.
Is it acceptable to modify a push rod?
Lycoming makes all different sizes of push rods. The ones that they provide for you are more than adequate to get what you need. Yes.
So, because it's such a small tolerance, you can't really like just ask for that kind of push rod. Is it like a guess and check, or do you just get something big enough to
So what I did when I got down to the engine buildup phase and I got down to this part, I would take all the push rods out, and I had a kind of a flat bench with a some sort of steel thing in the back that I would line them all up, push them all to that. Just look down at them, see which one is short and which one's long. And so I'd have like 6 of them would be, on a 4-cylinder, 6 or 5 of them were all the same. Then I had a few short and a few long. I would just start with the ones that are normal, and I would start with cylinder number 1, put 2 normal ones in, and see if it worked. If they both worked, fine, go on to the next one. And then if I got to the end and I was like, well, I still need, those don't work, I kept a box that had all different sizes serviceable ones, so those would go into my stock, and then the other ones would come back out. So you just had to have extras on file.
And you couldn't just, because our rocker arms have a little thread piece inside.
That's totally different.
Okay.
So hydraulic systems never have adjustable rocker arms. Never. That would make life too easy. Never. So actually it wouldn't, because that's a failure point. So yeah. I think that's,
What's our darn number?
there's a part number on them.
Yeah, but, yeah, I mean, you're not wildly guessing or having to measure, you could look at the,
Yeah, it would have the part number, say P10, P20, P30, something. But it's not 10, 20, 30. I forget. There's like 60, 80 or some number. And even if it doesn't, just trial and error. When one fits, then you're done. That's just it. So
It doesn't, there's aircraft streets.
then you got to order them. Like I said, I had a whole stock of them just so I wouldn't get to that phase of the engine buildup and walk in and tell the boss, well, I need some push rods. So it's going to be another 5 days for the engine's done. No, now, why do we have this discrepancy? Well, cam could have been reground, so it's a little bit smaller. The rocker arm could have been refaced, so it's a little bit smaller. The valve has to go down into a seat, so the valve could have been refaced. The seat could have been refaced, so if you reface the seat, it's going to go up a little bit more. Reface the valve, it goes up a little bit more. Could have ground the tip off a little bit, that takes off a little bit. So there's all these variables. Cylinder next to it could have had a brand new seat put in, so now its valve is actually sitting down that way more. So that's why they're all a little bit different height. There's nothing you can do to adjust the valve height. There's nothing you can do about the rocker arm. Sometimes I would get into a situation where if I really wanted to get an engine done and I was kind of running out of push rods and didn't have any, can start looking at, if you didn't have all the rocker arms custom fit, like I tell you, you can start moving rocker arms around. Some are thicker, some are thinner, but that's kind of getting off.
Kevin?
Yes.
In theory, if you replace your camshaft, it would cause you less problems if you, technically I know you have to replace all your tappets, but if you didn't with hydraulic tappets, it would be less problematic than not replacing it with solid tappets.
You don't have a choice. So like your engine does not have a pressure oil gallery that goes to this, so you could never put in a hydraulic unit.
Yes, but let's say I had a whatever 0320, whatever it has.
O320s all came with this already.
But let's say I had to replace my cam.
Okay.
You have to replace your tappets as well, correct?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
But if you didn't, because it has that big gap for clearance and because it adjusts automatically, would it affect it as much?
I'm not sure I follow. Would I have
So
more
if you didn't
problems?
replace the tappets.
If I didn't replace the tappets,
But you replace your
But you
cam.
replace the cam.
I wouldn't want to do that.
It would still
That's
cause,
what he's asking.
it would still cause a lot of problems with hydraulic.
But
Um,
the legs would be longer, presumably, and so-
Well, if you bought a brand new cam and brand new lifters, then yes, then you would possibly be more likely to need a shorter push rod.
I see.
But it's just not the case because you're taking off a few thousandths here and a few thousandths there. And because of the way it's a fulcrum and these distances aren't equal, so it's not a linear thing. I mean, it's linear, but it's not the same. It's like, so if I need to go 10 thousandths more here, 0.010, I don't need a 10 thousandths longer push rod. I'm gonna need like a 30 thousandths because it's like a 3-to-1 change. I'm just making up numbers because the rocker arm, picture of a rocker arm. I must. There we go.
One end of
The length of the two arms of the rocker.
There we go. See the rocker arm, this is not in the center. It's much closer to this side so it takes a much long, so, I was gonna say it takes a longer push rod to affect this over here, but it's actually the other way around.
Okay.
Sorry.
I know you're supposed to replace them. I know that. I was just curious.
You only replace them if you need a longer or shorter one. And I would say the thing that makes the most difference is not the cam and lifter change, it's the cylinder change. Cam and lifters are almost all the same size. Even if you had an old one, you bought a brand new one, the old one was about the same size as the new one when it was new. So everything is equal. But cylinders vary greatly in size. Their height, where the seats are, how the valve went in it, the length of the valve, everything is top end changes. Bottom end, not so much. All right.
Just natural manufacturing variability.
Yep. And like I said, you change out the seats, and then you just change the height of the valve. You change the height of the valve. This is where your problems start. It's not really a problem. It's what you deal with. You know, it's just part of building an engine. Okay. Let me think. Did I get everything? Let me see. Two-piece hydraulic. They should blade down. Yeah, I think I said that. We have to bleed them down. So I tap it. Never use a magnet. I will write that. Ooh. Edit, clear. So you always, always, always have to bleed down lifters. So always bleed down. Bleed down lifters to check. Dry tappet clearance. Well, you got these little guys right here, your Continental, big bore Continental. It's kind of the same thing. It's just you don't get the option of putting WD-40 and stuff in there, so you just get a piece of wire that's non-magnetic. Actually, a lot of mechanics, when somebody changes out a push-pull control cable out of a Bowden cable, like carb heat, something like that, you know what I'm talking about, you got the housing with the stainless steel cable goes through something. So yeah, we save them with like carb heat. So you have the control on one end, you get about that much wire. You can shove it down a push rod tube, and you'll hit that middle and just push with that thing, and it pushes the ball and squirts the oil out. So as you push on that, it'll squirt the oil out, and so that bleeds it down, so you can do the same thing. Like I said, a lot of mechanics don't bleed them down. It's hard. If you don't bleed them down, I've seen people do that sometimes. So, you know, they got the whole cylinder on, and especially a cylinder like this, where these Continentals are just like your 290s, but that has hydraulic tappets. So they get the whole thing built up, and you've got the push rod tube on, and you can no longer get to it because it's all the way buried down in the engine. This has another housing that goes over it, blah, blah, blah. Get it down, they're trying to put the rocker arms on. I can't get the rocker arms on. Well, did you bleed down the lifters? And they say,
No.
no, they don't say that, because they got to say,
What's that?
nobody's ever that. They have to repeatedly bleed down the lifters. See? You know you're in trouble when they do that. Did you bleed down the lifters? Bleed down the lifters. Okay, do you think they did it?
No.
You know. You guys do that to me all the
They
time.
repeat, yeah.
Yeah. What did you put on that bolt?
What did I
Put on that bolt? See?
Wet torques. Bolt tubes.
Yeah. So, I'm like, well, how are you going to check the dry tappet clearance? I mean, this thing's all the way buried inside the engine. One way to get to it now is pull the whole cylinder off, pull the housing off, get down there, and do what you should have done to begin with. Well, it's getting close to quitting. Here's what I'll do. I'm just going to force it all together, and they will. They'll force it together. And then I'm going to put it on like the intake stroke so that it's pushing down the valve overnight, and it'll bleed down. It's close enough. Okay. Sure you don't want to do it right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, don't be that guy, because it's so much easier to put together when you do it right. All right, so let me see.
So even with the calibrated leak, it just really wouldn't go down.
I've seen them not do it,
Yeah.
mostly because the oil's really cold.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's down the engine. It's cold. It's nothing's really, that's your problem. Let's see. I said all this. Oil takes out the lash, leak down past that. So that deflation allows plunger to change line compensation. It is important to note this because I'm going to talk about this in a second. It's the opposite of what you think this is going to be when we get into solid lifters. So as the cylinder heats up, what's it going to do? Expand or contract?
Expand.
Yep. It will expand. Which means it gets taller or shorter? If it gets taller, does that mean that clearance would become more or less?
Less.
Causing the rocker to tip clearance to become more or less.
Less.
More.
Now let's think it through. Wow, that's really a nasty valve. I didn't notice that. You guys can probably see it past the stupid wire. Just push it off. This is a push rod. Can't believe I don't have a rocker arm in my hand. Right. So we got the push rod going on a rocker arm, pushing up on that. But if I make the cylinder longer, the push rod gets shorter, which means that you're going to get more clearance. Become greater. Sure, the push rod gets hot, but it doesn't expand at the same rate. So it's really important to note that as the cylinder heats up, the clearances are going to get more, which in a hydraulic tappet situation, it just means the hydraulic tappet expands a little bit more and takes up so nothing happens really. So in an engine with hydraulic tappets, does the dry tappet clearance would in theory get more, but it's not dry because it's running, because that's what made it hot. So the tip to rocker arm clearance stays the same. It stays at how much? 0. Follow? Hope I didn't lose anybody.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, you always tell. All right. As the cylinder heats up, it expands. It gets taller. Well, as it gets taller, that means that under normal circumstances, that this clearance between this and the rocker arm would get greater.
More, right.
This grew,
And then rock arm
and
would fall
the
back.
push rod didn't. So in effect, it just gets shorter. So all this goes up, and this gets shorter. So it's, that means you got more clearance between the rocker arm and the tip. But the good news is we have hydraulic unit, which will just expand just a little tiny bit more, which means that this never knows the difference.
Got it.
This takes up the slack. All right. Never use a magnet. Oh, I'll throw this one out there. High flow versus low flow. All right, some engines, which is basically TCM, Continental, use high flow lifters on the exhaust and low flow on the intake. And those are identifiable. There we go. By visual. So you can see right here. Intake has the annulus is pretty small, and over here the annulus is pretty big. Now I've never really seen a publication that says why. I do remember it in my career where they changed it and they said, "Oh, we really want you to go to." The thing I don't remember was it take out the intakes and go to low flow on the intakes? I think it was the other way around. I think it was exhaust. Hey, take out the low flow and let's put in high flow on the exhaust. So I don't know if I believe this. Yeah, I wrote this. High flow lifters cause, well, this is true. The high flow lifters, the flow part means that they bleed down much faster. That's the flow part, because you're still getting same concept. Oil pressure out of the gallery, fills it up, expands it. There's no flow. You get flow once the camshaft is off its lobe, and now you get flow when it's bleeding down. So high flow is another way of saying fast bleed down. So on the exhaust side, we have fast bleed. We can call it that, fast bleed. And on the intake, we can call it slow bleed, which would be the same thing as saying low flow, and the same thing as saying high flow. Now I'm hoping that as you're progressing in your career and we've gone through this stuff, you can at least put a couple of things together with everything we talked about and start coming up with some ideas. What does that mean? Maybe not why, but what does that do to stuff? You know, we can look at the slow bleed, low flow. What is that doing?
Keeps the intake open longer and the exhaust closer.
Okay, so it's actually going to keep longer duration, or duration is opposite. So valve open longer. Okay, what about this one then?
Valve open short.
Yep. Valve opens less, or less duration of the openness. There we go. All right. That is true. Why do you think they'd want to do that?
Volumetric efficiency?
Okay, well, I think on the intake side, we would get higher volumetric efficiency, but I believe they've always been low flow on that side. So they were fine with it and they left it. Why would they then change this and want the exhaust valve duration to be changed?
Maybe so the valve seats on the cylinder for more often.
Okay, so
Heat transfer.
what does that get me?
More heat transfer.
More heat transfer. Exactly. Why not just reprofile the cam and just say, hey, let's make a cam that doesn't open as long and closes? I mean, wouldn't that be the ultimate fix, I would think? But they didn't. So,
Easier to change those.
now I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I think you're right about that. It did solve that problem, and rather than, if I really think it through, I'd say, well, you could have reprofiled the cam, but at that point they go, well, okay, if we're going to reprofile the cam, then we've got to come out with a service bulletin that says if you have this cam, you got to have low flow. If you have this cam, you got to have high flow, and it could be this big nightmare. So they could have just said, yeah, we're just going to change it, go high flow on the exhaust. That takes care of that problem. Done. Just leave everything else the same. So could be. That could very well be it in a nutshell. Done. Or we could add one more thing. What else would that mean?
When you're setting your clearance.
No.
No.
Clearance didn't change. Nothing changed about the... What about flow?
The hot exhaust flows more easily than the cold intake.
Well,
And so you don't
no.
need as much duration to
Mm,
discharge the same amount of volume.
no.
Ever have a problem with valve float?
Was that?
You ever have a problem with the valve float?
They turn too slow.
So it's not, well, yeah, it's-
Well, yes, I have had a problem with the valve float.
I'm thinking that with the classroom pretty down, you probably have less opportunity for smacking an exhaust valve on an overspeed.
I don't think that would be their concern. My opinion. Could be wrong. I could definitely be wrong. Just a
Since
thought.
Since the exhaust gets hotter, more oil cools them down.
I think that was it.
Oh wow.
Okay, so more oil. More oil for cooling, maybe. Why didn't they do it over here?
Because intake doesn't get as hot.
Not as hot. More oil here is bad. Why is it bad?
Pre-ignition.
Nope.
Detonation.
It's on the intake side. What happens if we get too much oil on the intake side?
Sticks.
What's that? It sucks it right down the guide.
Oh, right.
Sucks it right down the guide. So remember, big bore Continentals all have guide seals on the intake. They already have a problem with too much oil over there. So they got a problem with too much oil. So anyway, just my thoughts. I actually wrote that. I think TCM uses low flow on intake side to slow oil flow and high flow on exhaust side to increase flow. I think that was just that simple. Just want more oil. Again, I could be 100% wrong, but the whole point was, think this through. Why would they do that? Why, would one go one on one side, one on another? I don't know. To me, that's fun to kind of think that through. And when you're building up engines, kind of,
Troubleshoot.
consider what you're doing. What was the ultimate goal? They don't tell you.
Do you think there's that much difference volume-wise in the rocker?
I don't know what the flow rate is but man, they sure, made a big deal of it and they had to change them all out. And so it meant something to somebody.
But they didn't provide direction after the change.
Trade secret.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Trade
They
secret.
can't let you go back.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Okay. So that's hydraulic units. Big takeaway is don't use magnets. Always, always, always bleed them down when you're trying to reinstall the cylinder because you have to do dry tappet clearance.
Don't install the cap backwards.
Don't install the cap backwards. Yeah, I wish I knew where that was. All right. The opposite end of that is solid lifters. Your 290, the 235, most radial engines that I'm aware of all have solid lifters. So solid lifters must be, well, must be periodically adjusted, but I guess I could back up just a little bit. Say you have to adjust it. And so all you're going to do is you saw it. You've got the adjustment screw with the big jam nut on there. So you are going to assemble the engine. You're going to put all the push rods in because they're all the same. You don't get longer, you don't get shorter. You put it in there. Now there is a service instruction. I don't remember the number offhand, but you are supposed to preload the camshaft because you have a little bit of play in your camshaft. So if you're going to set this side first, it tells you in the directions. Go over to this side and take out all the lash. Push on that cam going that way, then set this one. It's in the service instruction, so you must preload it. And so you're going to set them. So let me see. So you're going to set it. What is dry tappet clearance? 618 dry tappet clearance. 28 to
80.
6 to 12. Sorry, 6 to 12. After run in. There's a note in there that says after run in. So 6.012. The service instruction is going to tell you what to do. I want to say it's 10 for some reason, but I don't remember. So after it's been run in other words, the cylinders it's not a brand new engine. The valves had a chance to seat and everything. You want 6 to 12. As the cylinder heats up, let's say you set it for 0.010 and it's cold. And by the way, tappet clearances will usually specify a cold clearance, not a hot. On radial engines, it's very specific. It would say cold clearance is. And I'm pretty sure this does too in the service instruction. So if I do a cold clearance at 010 and I take the engine out and I run it up and I recheck the clearance, what should it be?
Bigger.
More or less? More. Why is it going to be more?
Because the cylinder's stretched.
Because the cylinder stretched, the push rod didn't stretch as much, and so you're going to get more. So if you had to, what would happen if you adjusted it while the cylinder was hot? Somebody came in and said, hey man, I'm due for my 50-hour adjustment. Just flew in, it's nice and hot. You're like, well, 6 to 12. Man, I like to go on the newer side of everything, so I'm going to adjust these to 006. What's it going to do when the cylinder cools down? It's going to shrink. So the 6 is going to go to 00. How about a minus 004? What does that mean? Yeah, you're pushing the valve down at all times. So man, this thing doesn't run very well when it's cold. So you got to be careful. If you get it too small when the cylinder shrinks, it'll actually open the valves, and then you have to start the airplane with open valves. So you don't want to do that. So we have to set that. So solid lifters must be periodically adjusted. Make sure you follow the directions because you do have to preload. So you must preload cam. It's in the service instruction. I think this is a Q&A question. Insufficient clearance may cause objects to be closer than they appear. May cause the valve or valves to not seat when engine is cold. What if I get excessive clearance? I will lose power. Why? Excessive clearance will cause valves to, and this will be timing. Okay, open. Early or late? Late. Why late? It's behind the curve. So you should have had this much clearance, but now you got this much. So the cam starts to open it. Should have opened, 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 should have opened. Okay, now finally it opens. Well, now it's going to close real fast. You know, it should still be closing, but yet it's already done. So open, late, and close early.
That's a Q&A too.
Is it? Okay.
It's like Magneto points.
All right, I think most of this is just redundancy. Push rod transmits action to the rocker arm, carries oil to the rocker arm. Push rods are hollow. Yours aren't. Yours are solid. Or they're hollow with solid caps, so nothing gets in them. But a normal push rod, right there, has got a little hole there and a little hole there. And so when I'm overhauling an engine, we just reuse them. Just roll them down a flat plate, make sure they don't wobble. If they wobble, throw them out. Take the caps, make sure they're on solid. I look through them, make sure there's nothing on the inside. Other than that, they're pretty much good to go. Carries the oil to the rocker arm assembly. You can't see what I'm pointing at. Multiple lengths are used to adjust dry tappet clearance. Rocker arm there transmits the action to the valve tip. There are intake versions and exhaust versions. I won't bore you with that one. Let me see. Valve clearances, we talked about that. Cold engine needs valve clearance. Cold engine needs valve clearance. Let me see. Yep, we covered that. Excessive clearance. Valve opens late, closes early, too small. Misadjusted valve. Misadjusted valves. A decrease in volumetric efficiency and valve train damage. All right. There are many questions on your test, I think, pertaining to compression tests, which I don't want to go into big detail on compression tests, so I will probably just delete those out of your test. I didn't rewrite it because I have to send it into duplicating. I have to go to campus, pick it up. Not that I'm lazy, it's just didn't get around to it. And spark plugs. So let's see. Is it break time? It is break time. Let's go with break.